morning, everybody. This is Christian Zilovitz, Director of Pride School Atlanta, coming to you live from Decatur, Georgia, for Pride School Atlanta QED. It is Sunday, July 12th, 2016, and I am on the phone with two amazing people across the country in California with Dr. Jo Olson-Kennedy and Aydin Olson-Kennedy. And for those who don't know who they are, I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you, or perhaps they can introduce each other. Who am I going to hear from first?
I'll talk first if you want. So I can introduce Aydin. He is an amazing human who's been doing human rights activism for years. He currently is the director of the LA Gender Center, and his entire career is mental health support services for trans and gender nonconforming folks, partners, and families. That is not all that he does. He is a speaker around the country about trans folks and their needs and experiences, and helping to educate people who are interested in making the world a better place.
That's lovely.
Well, that was impressive.
You never knew.
Right. Dr. Olson-Kennedy, I think, is definitely one of the pioneers in care for trans youth. She is the medical director at the Center for Trans Health. Center for Trans Health Youth and Development? Something close to that. They messed that title up. At Children's Hospital in Los Angeles. She has conducted numerous research studies on a variety of different experiences for trans and gender nonconforming youth. An advocate, activist, and certainly international speaker about the importance of early intervention with blockers, prosthetic hormones. That's her husband and somebody who has respected her work for long before we were married. I think that Jo has spent a great deal of time taking huge risks on behalf of young people and young adults who maybe wouldn't have otherwise been able to get access to services, paved the way for trans youth care in this country, and I would say even other parts of the world as well.
That is excellent. That is excellent. Isn't it fabulous to know that I'm so grateful that you two found each other in this universe, and that I have had the good blessings to be, the good grace, or whatever word, the good fortune to be in the same universe as you both. And I believe I met both of you at Gender Odyssey in Seattle in our travels when I lived in Seattle. And I know, Jo, I remember meeting you when you came up with Chaz. I think that was that the first time you spoke at Gender Odyssey when you all came up together?
I don't think it was the first time. I've been speaking at Gender Odyssey for a number of years. I can't even remember how many now, but I think maybe 2008 or something. It's been a long time. It's hard to keep track of all of them.
Right. And, Jo, since I have you on the phone right now, let me ask you this. As actually what Aydin mentioned was really important to me, and I was thinking about that as well. One of the things that strikes me as really important is that when I access trans health care myself, one of the first things I look for is the provider open about providing trans health care and not afraid to lose business over the fact that they also provide trans health care. And when I looked for a chest surgeon back in 2006, 2007, that was one of the first things I looked for, and I was willing to fly to Cleveland, Ohio to find Dr. Medali and go to him because he proudly displayed his trans health care that he did. And what was that like for you the first time you were open about providing trans health care to youth?
Well, it never actually crossed my mind that I would have anything not to be proud of. I mean, the work with trans youth has been done at Children's Hospital Los Angeles in our division since the early 90s. My boss was the one who really started doing this work, Marvin Belzer, and it really grew out of the context of HIV youth care. And not surprisingly, we know that transgender young women are at such high risk for HIV acquisition and transmission that it made sense actually to couple the care together. Didn't make sense for someone to be getting their HIV care in one subspecialty space and then go and get hormone care in another subspecialty space. And it also made sense because there wasn't anyone doing youth care around hormones at the time. And so he jumped into the work, and it certainly was not as robust as it is today and as much growth as we've seen in the last 6 years or so since. I mean, I've been there for 10 years doing this work, but the work had been done for 10 or 12 years before I even landed there. I was remarkably blown away and awestruck that we were doing this work. It's one of the reasons that I chose Children's Hospital Los Angeles and in our division of adolescent medicine to do a fellowship program in adolescent medicine so that I could do this kind of care. It takes me aback even to hear you ask the question about, people not wanting other people to know they do trans care. I have, even though I know that is true, because when I train around the country, people say, please don't give my name out. I really want to fly under the radar because I don't want this to become my entire practice. And every time somebody says something like that to me, I think, man, you'd be so fortunate for this to be your entire practice. So for me,
You'd never lack patience.
Yeah, I never had a relationship with I don't want people to know that I do this work. In fact, right out of the gate, I was trying to advertise that I love this work, and I think it's one of the reasons that people come in from all over the country to get care at our center, because we're absolutely the largest number of young people in our entire division of adolescent medicine are trans and gender nonconforming adolescents and young adults, and it's amazing. It's the largest trans youth clinic in the world, and it's just amazing. Every day that I do the work, I'm so proud of the work that we do, and absolutely open about it in the media, on the conference circuit, in my research. I can't imagine feeling like I wanted this to be a secret.
And that I'm just standing here with my jaw open, because in listening and hearing, I know that your work has saved my life and brought, I remember the 2020 special, the first round, back in 2007, I guess, when I had just recently transitioned, when Jazz and all the kids were on, Barbara Walters, and the people that we were visiting, the family, friends in Chicago we were visiting at the time, were like, come, it's on TV. And to have this, Louisiana, very Catholic family so warmly get it because of the willingness of people like you to be out there on the front lines, even almost 10 years ago, it has, I think it started to transform things, to have the docs out there, and I think it's great because it's not so word of mouth anymore to get that trans health care. I mean, it is a little bit in the South here, still a little bit more word of mouth, and not everybody has the same list of providers, but also it's, some of it's very inaccessible still, and that's one of the things we were going to talk about today, and I'd love to hear from both of you. I'd love to hear from Classic. Okay. Because the dog, this is Classic. It's like a conference call at work. This is what working from home is. It's, I don't know, Bubba. Okay. It's, so in access to care for minority youth and kids who live, without insurance, under the poverty line, not even anywhere close to being well off enough to have $30,000 worth of implants of hormone blockers, which I had no idea some of it was that much, however much it is. What do you think, what do either one of you think is what is the real state of the union here, and what do you think needs to change what needs to happen in order for things to change?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. It's interesting. I'm putting together for the Amsterdam Conference, World Professional Association of Transgender Health, sort of this exact question. What does the broad picture look like across the country for youth care in general? So sort of hitting up all of the different larger places that provide trans youth care, specifically around medical interventions, hormones, and blockers. And the astonishing thing is that it's still, even though the growth has been tremendous, it's still a very, very low number of youth that are being taken care of, which is astonishing given the amount of media and amount of trans visibility that we've seen in the last 5 years. When I was calculating out the numbers, I was thinking, I think it's probably 3,000 to 5,000 youth across the United States who are getting care. And that's not a lot, because if you take the most recent or most widely cited prevalence data that says about 0.5%, you're talking about 700 or 750,000 people in the United States. Some of those are going to be young people, and it's got to be more than 3,000. And so there's still, when we talk about even the most, the young people that have the most barriers to access, it's still, youth still have huge barriers to access, and there is a gigantic lack of resources in the South and also the Midwest. So if you live in, I think if you live in New Mexico, if you live in Arizona, if you live in Nevada, if you live in that area of the world, Idaho, you're going to have to travel, which already means there's going to be a lot of people who don't have access to care. So I don't want to, I really don't want to shape a picture here of, well, this is all, trans youth care is totally accessible and culturally competent if you're white and have resources. That's not actually true, but I really want to talk about the issue that even in these major metropolitan areas such as Los Angeles, San Francisco, Boston, and Chicago, and to a certain extent New York, where there are services available for trans young people, we are not seeing trans youth of color in the blocker age group. So the younger kids are talking about in the 8 to 14-year-old age range. We're seeing a disproportionate number of Caucasian patients coming in, and a huge lack of, certainly not representative at all of the diversity of those cities. And I think it's not just limited to Black and Latino families that we're not seeing, but it's also Asian, like Asian Pacific Islander, Native American, all kinds of, we're just not seeing the diversity represented. So, for example, in my cohort of young people who are on blockers, which is probably 70 or 75 kids, we have about, I want to say that we have about 3 African-American patients, and every single one of them is adopted by white parents. So that's saying something. Now, we have about 14% of our kids are of Latino origin. They are not adopted, so they're coming from their primary families of origin. But that's still massively disproportionate compared to that there being 50% of Los Angeles being Latino in heritage and ethnicity. So something's happening where we're not able to reach into communities of color and provide information and access to resources for those families. And let me tell you why I think it's so critical. It's not news that the people that are at the highest risk for